I was on duty, worked night shift, because that's where the real policing happens, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And I was on duty and pulled over a car. Unbeknownst to me, had three MS-13 gang members in that car, and we had a little short dialogue. And it wasn't long after that everything kind of went south, and the front seat passenger in that car kind of whips around and ambushes me with 2 bullets. I took the first shot to my face.
Hi guys, I'm Houston Gas. Welcome to another episode of Thin Blue Blood. This is a show that showcases the stories of people that, extraordinary first responders that have nearly given their life in the line of duty. And here with me today is my good friend, Anne-Marie Carrizales.
How you doing?
Tell me about yourself.
Let's see. I was born to a U.S. Marine back in '73. Got great parents, 4 siblings. I'm married with 5 kids, 2 humans and 3 fur babies. And of course, I'm a Texas law enforcement officer. So yeah.
All right.
My story started out. I had 2 officer-involved shootings within the span of 1 year. First one was in October of 2012. And I was not shot during that shooting. I actually ended up doing the shooting, but I was dragged by a suspect who pinned my arm in a car window and kind of took me on a little trip there, which of course put me in a position that I had to utilize deadly force. Fast forward to about a year later, the following October, almost to the day, because the first one was on the 14th and the next one was on the 26th, and I was on duty, worked night shift, because that's where the real policing happens, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And I was on duty and pulled over a car. Unbeknownst to me, had 3 MS-13 gang members in that car, and we had a little short dialogue. And it wasn't long after that everything kind of went south, and the front seat passenger in that car kind of whips around and ambushes me with 2 bullets. I took the first shot to my face. So we share that. We share that, right? The bullet goes into my left cheekbone, travels through the left side of my face, and exits around the jawline just under the left earlobe. So it took my earlobe, obliterated that. Took my damn James Avery earring with it, and as I turned to do a tactical retreat, which is what fancy for get the hell out of Dodge, right? I took the second shot to the left side of my left breast.
Your doctors do fantastic work.
They do, right?
They really do.
Yeah.
What was your treatment like? How long were you in the hospital? And
Well, I had several surgeries. I had on my face and chest. The extent of the injuries were that the bullet actually traveled the path that it needed to travel to avoid any serious long-term injury. So if the way it was put to me is it needed to travel a path about that wide and stay within that path to avoid any long-term injury, and that's what it did. So the only real problems that I had as far as the facial injury was that I was having a little bit of scar tissue that was causing some problems with my face, and they had to go in a couple times and remove that scar tissue. I had to have my left earlobe, part of it was removed because there was a lot of tissue damage there. There wasn't getting adequate blood flow to it, and they needed to take it off. So what my surgeon did, my plastic surgeon went to do on the right side what he did to the left side to keep me somewhat symmetrical there. The real more serious injuries were down here to the chest. I was wearing a vest. A lot of people ask me that, because when they hear about the extent of the chest injuries, they want to know, well, were you wearing your vest? And the short answer is yes, I was wearing my vest. And the thing is that, a lot of people have to remember that the vest isn't even graded a certain, inch and a half out, depending on what level vest you're wearing. So we have this area here, it's the softest part of our vest, and that's where the bullet struck me as I was turning to my right. And when it hit the vest, what I imagine happens, it hits that first panel and it kind of bounces, and when it bounced, there was just nowhere left for it to go. So it goes into my body. The velocity of that round takes it down into my chest, almost penetrates my entire chest cavity, but then it pops back out, kind of like what I would imagine happened. You hit a heavy bag, bam, you hit the heavy bag goes, and then the energy comes back and it returns. And I think that's kind of what happened. I mean, I've never had anyone that could explain it, but I did get a massive hole in my chest from the entry wound of the round, but it did pop out of my chest and was kept in place by the vest. The vest held on to the round. Nobody can explain it. I know what happened.
Well, what do you think happened?
Well, I believe, I don't think, I know that by the grace of God, I'm standing here today. I wasn't alone fighting that night, as a lot of our warriors, all of our warriors that make it through something like this, we don't fight that alone. Whether we are physically the only ones you could see there against the bad guy, I don't believe we fight that alone. I had my guardian angel there with me, so I believe that's why I was here, left, living. I ended up having to get a partial mastectomy, though, of that left breast because of the damage sustained. I ended up getting a really bad infection inside of the breast because of little pieces of Kevlar that were left in there that went undetected and got infected. So they had to take half the left breast, and then I walked around like that for maybe about 10 months. So that was kind of pretty, And then they went in and did the reconstruction. So once they did the reconstruction, they were able to kind of put me back together so that there was really no physical remnants other than, some scarring and things that they just couldn't help. But put me back together, made me as close to normal as possible.
Going through your experience and all that you went through medically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, with your family, what would you say was probably the hardest part for you to deal with?
Hands down, the easy part was taking the rounds, which, as you know, is not easy. But that was the easy part. Having gone through all of that, the shock of just being shot in the face and chest, and then having, this is the second time within 1 year, and all of that entails that it puts the family through, the shock of it. But that was the easy part. The hardest part for me was not the surgeries, which also was not easy, was not that physical recovery. It was the aftermath of that. It was the fight that we have after we win the fight for our lives. It is the fight after the fight, which is what I like to refer to it. The fight after the fight. The part nobody tells you about.
It's funny how demons have a funny way of coming back and keep agging at you with all of that, because deep down they know they can get to you, man, because the emotional side of things, they can use that to attack things with your family. How did that affect your family? How did it affect your marriage?
It affected all the relationships. Really, all the close relationships in my life were affected by the incident on October 26th of 2013. All of them. It affected my marriage in ways that I had never even considered, ways that my marriage wasn't affected even after the first shooting, and after other tough times that I've ever had in my life. So, you have to remember that, like I said, we're not trained for something like that. So when I got home, I did what I was supposed to do, right? I won the fight. We all go home. This is a creed that we live by in police culture. We all go home, and then what, right? Then you're left there to figure it out on your own. And so I started to realize that I was in a place that I didn't expect to be in. I found myself fighting another fight with an opponent that I had not prepared for because I didn't know. I didn't know there was this phase to the fight. So my relationship started to struggle as I started to struggle. When I started to struggle with nightmares, when I started to struggle with anxiety, when I started to struggle with a lot of the anger that was festering inside of me, it started by, my husband, why are you always so angry? And me feeling judged by my spouse and not understood by my children. Because it's, for me, and for a lot of officers that I've had the opportunity to speak to, that guilt that we carry on the shoulders of what we've put our families through, it eats at us. And for me, that guilt started to turn into anger because I had no control. I had no control. And of course, we're cops. What are we? We're control freaks. We're used to being in charge. And, so, the marriage suffered. The marriage suffered. The relationships with my children suffered. My children were hurt. My children were scared. They were angry at me because you just got shot and you're alive. And then the suspects ran away. And instead of staying there in essence, safe, you choose to get in your car and chase them and pursue them. So why would you do that? It's a valid question, but how do you answer that?
There really isn't any good answer to that because
that's going to satisfy them. No. Right.
No. I mean, we do it because that's what we're trained to do.
Right.
But it's hard to convince your loved ones of those things.
Right. And so, you have all of those things that you're trying to deal with and find the answers, and you don't know the answers. And I think for people that are wired, like most law enforcement officers and veterans, as I'm a Marine Corps veteran, we're wired to have an answer quick. You shoot me a curveball and I have an answer for it. You shoot me this or that, I have an answer. We're going to adapt, improvise, adapt, overcome, improvise, adapt. But I didn't have an answer here. So, what was happening is I'm getting my ass kicked and I don't have an answer. I have a punch combination for it, so it was frustrating. And of course, when you're angry and scared and hurting and frustrated, the intimacy in a marriage can suffer. The friendship that you had with your spouse will suffer. Your relationships with your kids will suffer, and they do. And I didn't have the answer. I think it's just important that every officer has to find their why. And I remember the moment I found my why, the moment when it presented itself and I said, you better start to figure this out and do the work and find the answer because you're going to lose everything, so.
Then you eventually went back for a little while.
Actually a long while.
What would you say to those that are been injured, gone through what we've gone through, or at least similar situations? What would you say to them if they are going to consider going back? What would you say to them? What would you have them say to their families?
I would say to them that they need to do the work. That they have to do the work. They have to find their why. Their why is what's going to light the fire in their ass for them to do the work. Because when we have to do the work just for ourselves, I found that for me and for a lot of other officers in situations like we've been in, that's not enough motivation to do the work. You have to do the work. And what I did was I found my why in my children. I found my why in my husband. I found my why in my dog. You know what I mean? Everything that I held dear was my why, and that fueled the fire in me to start to educate myself about what was happening to me, why that was happening, how does it happen, how that works in our brain. When I started to gain an understanding of what was happening to me, what post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic stress disorder is, because they are not the same thing. They're two different things. They're not one and the same. When I started to realize that PTSD was not a death sentence by understanding how it worked, I started to feel less like a weak person, more like, okay, I understand it, I get it, and I can overcome it. I got this. So I found the answers by educating myself. But if you're not going to do the work, you're just going to do yourself a disservice. You're going to do your family disservice. You're going to do the citizens in the community that you choose to go back and police. You're going to do them a disservice, your partners a disservice, because you won't be ready. You won't be 100% ready. And you got to be all there. I always tell my rookies, you got to be all there. And you're not going to be all there if you're not going to do the work. You know what I'm saying? So I would tell them, if you want to go back after a critical incident like this or a line of duty injury like this, can it be done? Abso-freaking-lutely can be done. When I'm out there on them streets now and I make a call and I got to clear a room with somebody, I have more credibility to do that with someone now than I've ever as a law enforcement officer, because I've been battle tested. I have PTSD, but I do the work. So my issues aren't unresolved. I address them and I face them head on. So I like to say, I'm kicking the hell out of PTSD. Well, what do I say? My little thing, kicking PTSD's ass, because you can. You absolutely can. And it doesn't make you weak. And people look at you, Houston, and they don't see weakness.
I hope not.
You know what I mean? They look at, people like me and they say, I see, you look so, you're strong. Well, I have my days, but I'm doing the work. I'm fighting back, and that's what it's all about. Keep on fighting.
You talk about the fight after the fight.
Yep.
You talk about the things. What are you doing with that now?
What am I doing with that? I travel all over the country. I travel all over the country, outside of the country, and I share in a very raw and honest and transparent way. What I'm hearing is that the presentation that I share is one of the most honest and hard to sit through type of presentations. But, I do that because I feel like that is why I'm here. That is why I'm alive today. I have a duty to my brothers and sisters in law enforcement to share with them this story. All of it, not just little bits and pieces. I'm talking about the God part of it, how I feel about I'm here because of God, right? Even though I know everybody in the world doesn't believe in God, that's okay. But that's a part of my story. It's a part of my journey. It's a part of how I healed. So I share that story, and what I'm finding is that it's giving people hope. It's giving people hope. It's giving them an understanding that PTSD, A, it's not a death sentence. B, you can get shot in the kill zones like you and I, face, chest, and still be in the fight. It doesn't mean you're out of the fight. So there's just a lot of messages that can be taken from it, and I feel like I have a duty to share that. You come on my scene when we're on a call together, and I have a duty to fill you in and brief you and let you know what we're going into together. We claim to be a family, and we need to be doing that for each other.
Absolutely. Well, I know one thing is for sure. I would go on any call with you, and I would go with any fight with you at any point in time.
As I would with you.
And
that person would be in trouble, wouldn't they?
Amen. They would. They absolutely would. This is Anne Marie Carrizales. She believes in sharing her story. And if you believe in her story as much as I believe in her story, go ahead and share her story for her. Go ahead and hit the like and the share button, and let's get this out there.